was a dark and stormy night in the wee hours of July the 4th, 1947. Then, all of a sudden, there was a ball of light streaking across the sky, culminating in a crash. The military personnel were dispatched to the site to investigate what had happened. They picked the site clean and informed the residents of Roswell that a flying saucer had crashed. Soon after, the story was recanted and the public was informed that a weather balloon was recovered. There was a public outcry because the local residents saw dead bodies at the site. So, the military changed their story to a recovery of test dummies. End of story. But is it?
Oh, we're not gonna take it. I know we ain't gonna take it. Oh, we're not gonna take it anymore. We've got the right to choose it. There ain't no way we'll lose it. This is our life. This is our song.
Welcome back. My name is Klaus and I'm going to be your host and narrator for this video. The soundbite that you had just heard is how most people remember the Roswell crash. But today we get to do a book review titled The Day After Roswell. Lieutenant Philip J. Corso, co-author, is going to let us in on what he's discovered in the military, industry, and scientific communities. He's also inherited a top-secret filing cabinet containing retrieval, medical, and autopsy reports, plus a small cache of debris. I would like you to watch this video with a critical eye to determine whether this is a documentary or a science fiction. I'm sure credibility is a huge factor in that determination, so let's examine the author's credentials. During World War II, Corso was an Assistant Chief of Staff of Intelligence with a G2 clearance for the Rome Area Allied Command and advisor to General Trudeau. He was an intelligence officer and still being an advisor to Trudeau throughout the Korean War. After being promoted to Lieutenant Colonel, Corso was transferred to the Army Research and Development Team at the Pentagon, while still reporting to Lieutenant General Arthur Trudeau, Director of Research and Development. His duties of foreign technology was to research and evaluate weapon systems for the Army, read technology reports, and meet with engineers at Army proving grounds, and review heavily classified material on behalf of General Trudeau. As part of the Foreign Technology Desk, he inherited a filing cabinet containing the Army's deepest secrets, the Roswell files, what Corso refers to as his nut file, because it was a cache of debris, the 509th Army Airfield Retrieval Reports, medical examinations, and autopsy reports. In 1964, Corso served on General Storm Thurmond's staff. In his final years, Corso was an investigator for Senator Richard Russell, a Warren Commission member. Wow, what a resume. With that kind of intelligence experience and clearance level in the military, and reporting to a lieutenant general, it sounds to me that Corso would like to keep the reputation for honesty. Not only is Corso's reputation at stake by writing The Day After Roswell, but the reputation of all those he mentions in his book, the reputation of those mentioned in the military, the residents of Roswell, and the scientists that he saw in industry. Their reputations are at stake too. These are not fictitious characters, but real people. Okay, my intrepid investigator, break out your shovel. We're about to dig into not only the day after Roswell, but the weeks, months, and years thereafter. Ever wonder why the Army responded so quickly from the 509th Airfield in a sleepy town called Roswell in New Mexico? The crash may have occurred in the wee hours of July the 4th, but the real Roswell story starts on July the 1st, when both the 509th and White Sands discover strange blips on their radar zipping across the screen. Sometimes they would hover over military installations and then disappear. The radar blips were interpreted as hostile. You see, you have to think back to 1947. In that period of time, the bad guys were the Russians. So the base goes into high alert, orders are given for more counterintelligence personnel to report to New Mexico, especially the 509th. Diagnostics are to be run on the radar, and reconnaissance flights are ordered. Well, nothing was found in the air or on the ground. No faults were found with the radar, but yet the anomalies still continued. Yes, it was a dark and stormy night in the wee hours of July the 4th, 1947. Bolts of lightning and claps of thunder were so intense that Dan Wilmont, the General Hardware Store owner, and his wife watched the show, quote, better than any 4th of July fireworks they saw, end quote. They watched in awe as a bright oval light streaked over their house and disappeared into the northwest. Also, it streaked over Steve Robinson, the milk truck driver, engaged in his early morning deliveries. While all this was going on, Steve Arnold, a non-commissioned counterintelligence officer, was watching his radar screen at the 509th control tower. He describes the blip as traveling over 1,000 miles an hour, exploding in a brilliant fluorescence and evaporating off his radar screen. All right, now the Army springs into action. The commanding officer of the 509th, Colonel William Bull Blanchard, dispatches a crash retrieval team consisting of medics, hazmat sweepers, signalmen, radio operators, and MPs, as well as 2.5-ton trucks and a lowboy flatbed to the crash site. Ranchers, campers, and residents who saw the crash called the Chavez County Sheriff, George Wilcox, and he put the Roswell Fire Department on alert. While working in the desert, Indian artifact hunters felt a ground-shaking thud. Not knowing what it was, they raced to investigate. Upon arrival, they saw a pulsating light and heard a burning hiss. They immediately radioed George Wilcox of the crash site location. The sheriff's office dispatched the Roswell Fire Department, and the fire department requested a police escort. The race to the crash site was on. The crash and retrieval team were the first to arrive at the crash site. The staff cars and jeeps organized themselves around the perimeter of the area and lit the area up with their headlights. The MPs posted their sentries, and the engineers ordered strings of floodlights to be set up. Now that the crash site is lit up, Steve Arnold, our NCO CIC, non-commissioned counterintelligence officer, sees a soft-cornered, delta-shaped, eggshell-type craft angled 45 degrees, nose hard into the embankment, tail up in the air with two fins angled up and out. Workers in hazmat suits check the site for radiation. 4 little dark gray figures, about 4 to 4.5 feet long, were found sprawled across the ground on the side of the craft that was split open. One soldier calls out, "Hey, this one's alive!" He hears nothing but feels an overwhelming sadness in his brain as he sees a little figure convulsing from side to side on the ground, the oversized egg-shaped skull flipping from side to side, trying to grasp for something to breathe. A sentry screams, "Halt!" and other soldiers shoot a volley of bullets into a small figure as it desperately tries to climb over a hill. Steve Arnold is ordered to prevent civilians from crossing the perimeter, while medics are loading their small bodies onto the stretcher. A sergeant orders his men to pick up all the debris. Off in the distance, lights and sirens from the Roswell Cavalry are seen and heard, so MPs are ordered to fix bayonets and lower them for the arriving emergency vehicles. Too late, the secret's out. Dan Dwyer, a Roswell firefighter, sees a deltoid-shaped craft being loaded on the Army flatbed. He hears an Army captain dismiss the Roswell police from the scene as he sees small bodies being loaded into the Army trucks. The Army captain declares to the Roswell police that no injuries had occurred and they didn't see anything at all. Nothing at all. The secret has started. In order to get a better view, Dwyer gets out of the fire truck and outflanks the MPs. What he sees is a small creature strapped down to a stretcher being loaded into an army truck. The creature doesn't make a sound, but Dwyer feels that it is dying. Dwyer finds a dull gray material, rolls it into a ball, and it snaps back without any creases or folds. He stuffs it into his pocket and brings it back to the firehouse. Major Jesse Marcel, the 509th Base Intelligence Officer and Roswell resident, recommends to Dwyer to get out of here and never tell anyone where you were and what you saw. Back at the 509th Army Base Hospital, plumbing contractor Roy Danzer has worked throughout the night and was standing by the hospital entrance. He sees a creature strapped on the stretcher as it is whisked by him. He sees the pleading look on its face and feels the emotions of pain and suffering in his brain. Colonel Bull Blanchard, the 509th Base Commander, authorizes the release of the flying saucer story. The next day, General Roger Ramey, 8th Army Air Force, orders Jesse Marcel to retract the flying saucer story and replace it with a crashed weather balloon story. Part 1 is coming to a close. Part 2 will describe the distribution of the debris, spacecraft, and the alien bodies. But before we sign off, there are some additional people we need to discuss. For example, Mac Brazel, the property owner where the crash occurred. He also reported the crash to the police and visited the crash site, for which he was bribed and threatened by the military to keep quiet. News correspondents John McBoyle of KSWS and Walt Whitmore of KGFL were forced to submit to the Army's official line and made never to broadcast their reports. Sally Dwyer, a young child and daughter of Dan Dwyer, the Roswell fire chief, played with the alien fabric and heard Dad's stories of the little people. During debriefing, Sally was threatened that, should she tell, both she and the family would disappear in the desert, which terrified her. So what's the grouse? I'm grousing about the Army Air Force's public relation policy. How could such a venerable branch of the United States military stoop to bullying the citizens of the country that they're sworn to protect? The citizens of Roswell, including the Dwyer family, were threatened that they would disappear in the desert and their bodies would never be found if they ever spoke of the Roswell incident. Little Sally Dwyer, I recall about 5 years old at the time, was present at this so-called debriefing. She was terrified for the rest of her life. George Wilcox, the Chavez County Sheriff, was never the same after the Roswell incident. He saw the alien bodies, he saw the crashed saucer, he saw the debris, and still he was told to keep quiet. Nothing to see here. Go home. We do not need your help. And another thing that ruffles my feathers are the outrageous lies. Weather balloons, parachute dummies. Neither of these things go streaking across the sky at 1,000 miles an hour and crash into brilliant fluorescence on radar. I believe a mushroom fireball might appear as a brilliant fluorescence. And just out of interest, what's the military trying to accomplish by conducting these tests in the middle of the night and in the middle of a thunderstorm? Could the incidents be handled by telling the truth, like the 2015 Tic Tac incident? The military acknowledged they didn't know what it was. Fine, so get back to us when you do know. That example gives the military some time to bury the incident and treat everyone with dignity and respect. One last thing in my claw is the tampering with official documents. This is brought to light in the book The Day After Roswell, page 4 of the introduction. Quote, sometimes the dates of the crash may vary from report to report, July 2nd or 3rd as opposed to July the 4th, end quote. Corso acknowledges that he was never present at the crash site, but got his information from military reports. Corso appears on the scene when the saucer debris and alien bodies are transported. That'll be in part 2. George Wilcox certainly knew the date and time he left the police station. Dan Dwyer, the fire chief, would know the date and time he left the fire hall, and certainly Steve Arnold, monitoring the radar in the 509th control tower, would know the date and time he saw the blip, quote, darting across the sky between blips at speeds over 1,000 miles an hour, end quote, page 11, chapter 1. The staff at the 509th Army Hospital would know the date and time they examined the alien bodies. So how is it that none of these reports can agree? Unless someone in charge of the crash retrieval altered the information. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for part 2, which will outline the route and distribution of the saucer debris and alien bodies. Thanks again.
We ain't gonna